Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We think that there is a big problem in Singapore today with respect to access to affordable housing. We think the problem is that in a day and age when the government has done a really spectacular job of making sure that Singapore is going towards a progressive first world nation with a strong, vibrant economy, where people start earning at a younger and younger age. At the same time, the government is holding a stance that shows that young people or young single people aren't capable or don't have the right to become homeowners and to start their own independent life. We think that this stance in itself goes against the fact that so many young talented people in Singapore today are starting to earn at as young as 18 years of age, are taking up jobs and becoming valid parts of the economy. We think that this is something that needs to be changed. So, before we go on, I'm going to talk about the model and about the current status quo that exists. And my substantives will be based on the fairness aspect to these young people, about the idea of filial piety and what effect this has, and lastly about the idea of diversity in housing. So, first of all, what is the status quo? Basically, all people in Singapore who are can only own HDBs if they are married or singles who are above the age of 35. We think that this in itself shows a particular dichotomy, and this needs to be brought down so that all singles, married people, everybody in society, like Europeans and residents, should be able to buy flats above the age of 25. We think this is going to be a clear and simple stance. We think that all of them have the right to become homeowners and deserve it, and that will also be economically much more feasible for them. So this brings us on nicely to the idea of what stage of life are these people in. We think that these young people are at a career building stage. This is the stage at which they have started to earn a significant amount of money, and we think that these people are becoming more and more independent. They aren't children anymore. They aren't going to university or school. These are people, most of these people have become independent. They have their own career and their own relationships. We think that at this stage, if they need to go and rent a house, it is particularly harmful because this is the stage at which they can save money and they can start affording a housing loan. We think it is a healthy age for them to take a housing loan because, let's face it, in Singapore, rent is fairly expensive. As much as the cheapest two-room HDB apartment can cost as much as $1,500 a month. And for most of these young people who can now afford to pay maybe like a fraction of that much for a housing EMI or a loan installment, rent is just a sunk cost. This is just money that they're going to keep losing for 5 years if they just keep staying in a rented place for 5 or 6 years at a stretch. We don't think that it's fair to expect them to spend those kind of resources and at the end of it not even own an asset when they could have done otherwise. We think that the purpose of housing in itself is to provide access to affordable housing in Singapore for Singaporeans. We think that it's very important that initial foundation of building HDB apartments be stuck to, and that this access be made available to these very valid, legitimate sections of society. This brings me on then to this idea of filial piety, because the major reason why this policy was put into place was this idea that if people are allowed to stay, are forced to stay as long as possible with their parents, there will be more filial bonding and piety, and these people will take care of their parents. We don't think that this is necessarily true, nor does it work, and neither is it efficient or fair if it is actually applied. So what are the various effects of this? First of all, we think filial piety is a very sacred thing, but it is also something that is very intrinsic. It comes from values which are sown in you from childhood. Please sit down and stop interrupting me. So let me have the idea that we don't think that you can force people into having these kind of sentiments. We think that either these people will move out because they are strong-willed, young, talented individuals and they feel constricted in the space of their own parents' home. So that means you're just plain old forcing them to pay that rent every month. On the other hand, if the government strategy works and they stay with their parents, we don't think that this improves filial piety. Before I go on, anyway,
You're perhaps understating the state interest. It's perhaps not that of filial piety, but a scarcity of resources and how we allocate resources in a generation where we need to ensure marriage as an institution is preserved.
But we don't see the purpose or the foundation of this policy in itself being the scarcity of HDB flats, because the whole purpose of this was to allocate this to married couples and to bring about bonding. And we think that this idea of resource scarcity can be dealt with in various ways. We don't think we need to compromise the rights of significant sections of society in trying to do resource allocation. We think that Singapore has been able to take care of various needs of people in spite of it being a small piece of land, in spite of it being fairly densely populated. We think this is one step. We can go further. Then let's talk about these principles. Let's talk about what if you force them to stay? What if you force young people to stay with their parents? We think, and this is where we also move into the active harms of this policy. We think if you force these young people to stay with their parents, their relationships get strained, because this is the point of life at which people start to feel strained, feel the need for independent space, and they're not necessarily ready to get married. We think that this relationship will become additionally unhealthy, will become strained, and will become a burden for these young people, and then filial piety goes away right there. We think that even if we allow them to own their HDB apartments, they can always live elsewhere, but like go across on weekends, have lunches, dinners, go on holidays. We think that filial piety can be held and cultivated in various different ways, even with maintaining their relationships in a much healthier way. Next, let's go on to this idea of diversity. We think that the initial purpose of building HDBs was to encourage racial harmony, to encourage diversity among people, as well as to encourage diversity in age groups, in all different kinds of ways, so that people have different choices in terms of social groups. People have healthy relationships all across. We think if we allow these kind of young single people into HDB complexes, it's a very good thing, because this idea of mixed precincts with having elderly single people as well as young single people, young, more progressive looking, forward looking people who have a slightly different ideologies is a very good way of mixing together these things and creating healthy relationships, creating healthy social groups which are incredibly diverse. We think we need these kind of people inside of these homes. Lastly, we go on to this whole idea of this sends out an extraordinarily discriminatory message towards women. We think that this sends out the message that only married women should be allowed to start their own life or become homeowners, and it shows that women haven't contributed as a big economic part of the workforce and as a valid part of Singapore society on their own. We don't think we need to force these people to get married, nor do we need to force them to live with their parents. It can work otherwise.